Edward Kirathe is my name, as you heard. I'm the group CEO at Acorn, and I'm very passionate about investments, how wealth is created, and also very impressed when I met Agatha talking to young people about what we should have all known when we were 21, but nobody told us. So happy to be here and engage with you guys. Thank you.
All right. So the last time I interviewed Mr. Edward Kirathe, that is when he first introduced the concept of investing in financial assets versus investing in physical assets versus investing in financial assets. And from what he taught us from that video, I picked it up and I created this reel that went viral, and Kenyans were very salty about the things that I said in that reel. And one of the things I said is that Kenyans are going to ignore money market funds, real estate investment trusts, bonds, bills, the stock market, just to buy another piece of unproductive. Yes. Just to buy another piece of unproductive land. So Kenyans are very salty. And then I said that something else that Kenyans will do is that you will build mansions in the village, or we will build mansions in the village, but do you have an emergency fund? So that mansion cannot save you. That is a problem. The other thing, and I'm very happy that we have a retiree in our presence, is that a lot of us start thinking about our retirement when we are 50. And one of the problems we run into is that you are asset rich, but cash poor. You have so many pieces of land, but and I'm sure you've had this experience, because I've also had this experience where my grandmother will call me and ask me, Wajiro, unaweza nitumia 1,300? And in my head I'm thinking, but you own so many pieces of land, right? In terms of the assets that you own more than I do, right? So that's a problem. Why are you asset rich and cash poor? And so that's why, and so Kenyans didn't like that, but it's nice when people don't like everything that you say. So that is why we are having this conversation today. And to start off, I'm going to ask Mr. Edward Kirathe a few of the questions or a few of the comments that people submitted under that reel. The first one is somebody commented that unproductive land can serve as collateral for a loan, but my units at Vuka, or even he was not just talking about my units at Vuka, also my shares, my money market fund, I can't use that as collateral for a loan. So we will still buy land. That's what he meant. So what's your opinion on that?
Okay. First and foremost, the nature of what I do requires me to travel quite a bit around the world, see places where wealth has been created and how it's actually created. And the thing that always baffles me is how rich a continent we have, or even a country, but how much there's so much poverty. And it's baffling because we are grown up being told that we are poor in Africa, we need aid, foreign direct investments, and all of that stuff. But that's a red herring. We're an extremely wealthy continent. And I think, the work I do forces me to work with data rather than people's feelings or stories or emotions or views or gut feel or all of that. So I want us to do a little exercise together. And I'm answering the question. I'm coming to this guy's question. But let's do a little exercise. So in Kenya, as I've told you, I work with a lot of data. Do you know how many working Kenyans there are? Out of our population, we are hitting around 48 million. How many of us are working, whether formal or informally? Anyone knows? Yeah, so someone says 15 million, another guess, it's about 18 million. Okay, so if you take 18 million Kenyans who work every day, if 30% of them were, or a third of that group was actually saving and investing, and a third of that is 6 million, okay? So take 6 million, and if we were investing 5,000 bob a month, on average, so some people maybe it's 2, some people it's 10, right? Average 5,000. How much is that a year? Five, anyone can do that number? Yeah, someone there at the back. No. So 6 million people investing an average of 5,000 shillings a month. How much is that per year? Per year? 360 billion. That is the cost of the SGR with change. So how many SGRs could we build in Kenya every year? A complete every year. But now we got to borrow the money from China, from other places. All the best investments in this country, including this expressway, have been built with foreign money. All the money you're now paying on the toll is going outside. So, what is my point? My point is that we are extremely wealthy continent, but because we hold our wealth in physical assets rather than financial assets, it makes the growth of that wealth extremely, extremely difficult. Now, talking about land, yes, you can go and borrow with it, but as I told you, you can also go and find there are 3 title people who own that land, right? You can also fall sick and you cannot pay your medical bill with that piece of land. And the last point I want to make from that question is, if you want to impoverish yourself, live on debt. This idea that you go borrow with your land, or even from the circle, the moment you go into debt in Kenya, there's a reason why the most profitable companies in Kenya outside Safaricom are banks. You just make money for the bank. So unless you're investing in something that has a return of north of 20-25%, it doesn't really make sense to take debt. That is the reality. So I would say to that person to think again about whether they want to be using the land for going to collateral, or whether they would rather have that money in a financial asset that's earning a return for them, that is liquid, and that can help them during their time of need. I think that's a way to think about this. Now, because it used to bother me a lot, why are we so caught up with physical assets? It's very cultural for us in Africa. It is extreme. It is so cultural, and that even dowry is calculated with physical assets. Then it's converted. These days we convert it to cash. But it's so ingrained in us that your sense of worth and well-being depends on how many properties you own, land you own, cows you own, goats you own. But it is an extremely unproductive way to store wealth. And so that was the point I was making. And that's why when you travel around, if you go to the most developed countries, everybody's wealth is in financial assets. It's not in physical assets. Yes, you go to America, many people own their own homes, but they also have a 401k plan. They also invested in mutual funds, etc., etc. In fact, interestingly, the other day, I don't know if you read in the news how BlackRock was investing in the stock exchange. And BlackRock is the world's largest manager of money. But that money they hold belongs to the mwananchi in those markets. It is not it's not institutional money. At the end of the day, it is retail investors, it is individual investors. So they hold, that's how people there are taught how to do their savings and investments. But here you grow up on the dining table.
Yes.
And the conversation is about that plot.
Yes.
Have you had so and so? Now they own that, and that's a sense of pride that we build. So it's deeply cultural for us, but it is impoverishing us. And the sooner we realize that, then the better for us.
Yes, and it's indeed true that it's a cultural problem, because most of the people that I interact with, either through the newsletter or one-on-one coaching, almost 9 out of 10 people I interact with, they will tell me that their introduction to investments or the introduction to financial literacy was, they were told, work hard in school, get a job, at least there is open a SACCO account, right? Get a SACCO. A lot of us are very familiar with SACCO. So the script is work hard in school, get yourself a job, open a SACCO account, start saving. Why? So that you take a loan to buy? Yes. So it's very embedded in us. So this conversation we are having is both cultural and financial. All right. So the next sentiment, this is a bit long. So land. So he was fighting and saying land is productive and a good investment. In a growing area, it will increase in value for resale, irrespective, or you can build rentals. That's another thing with Kenyans. Or you can build rentals and get a guaranteed monthly passive income or pension for the rest of your life. In other areas, you can use it for farming, get tenderpreneurs, get tenders with brokers or companies who will be coming for your produce, and you can turn it into a livestock ranch. This is a lot. It's how someone uses land that will make it valuable, the amenities around that land and the future of that area. So this person is arguing it's actually a good investment.
Yeah, so he's talked about, or she, about two things. One, farming, keeping cows.
Tenders.
The other one was, I don't know how you do tenders with the land, or use it as security, I suppose, to get a tender.
Yes, and building rentals.
And then, of course, rentals. Those are all different activities. So let's take them one at a time. So let's start with farming.
Okay.
Subsistence farming, if there is someone who hasn't discovered it has no returns, I would be very, very surprised. Subsistence farming is subsistence farming.
Yes.
Now, all the farming that people are doing is actually, in the most part, not even making a return. I have talked to so many people. They start with this, the other on farming, especially on small plots.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere in the world, including the US, Japan, anywhere you go in the world, farming and agriculture is the one sector that's always subsidized by government.
That's true.
The reason there are subsidies is because on its own, nobody would farm. The government has to provide subsidies for farmers to farm, otherwise they would not do it. Mm-hmm. If it was done on a purely commercial basis, it is one of the sectors, and the reasons government subsidize farming is very simple. If they stop subsidizing, no one will farm, and then people will die of hunger. And you can't depend on importing food unless you're in the Middle East. In certain places in the Middle East where it's all desert, you have to import. Most farming is not productive and does not give a return. That's why everywhere in the world it's subsidized.
Okay.
So, and I'm not saying now we stop farming. Subsistence farming still provides for many, many people.
That's
but
true.
I'm just saying it's not a way to save and invest. In fact, if you don't wake up and take care of your crop, it won't be there. Remember that savings and investments should be leading you towards, what someone said here, having choice, deciding whether you want to go to work tomorrow or not, contributing to others. We heard about how you can contribute to other people's lives. So, it's not a way for savings and investments. I have talked about rentals before. I run the largest rental business in the continent. Anyone who thinks rental is a place to go and make wealth as an individual, it's a very complex business. And I think I talked last time about how I have met so many people asking me, how do we get out of our rentals? Because the moment you retire and get old, and I think I don't know if it's in the Wealthtribers, I talked about this gentleman who came to see me. He had a lot of flats in Westlands, fairly wealthy guy, and he was 83. And he was coming to see me because he came to see me on a Thursday. The previous Friday, he was at Parklands police station locked up. 83-year-old man, he was a famous ambassador. And the reason he'd been locked up is because in his apartments, 2 people had moved out, done an illegal KPLC connection. So when the new tenants came, when KPLC came, they found illegal connections. Who do they arrest? Do they go for the tenants who took off with the illegal connection? They came for him. So he came and told me, you know, Kirathe, I built these flats and apartments when I was in my 40s and early 50s as a retirement program for myself. Now, these things have become a burden. I'm 83. I'm getting shot in a cop station because some guy created an illegal connection. I have tried everything in the world. I have tried to hire a property manager. They steal from me. They have tried to ask my children to come back from overseas to run these things. They say, Dad, why, my life is now here. Why would I come back? So he has come to see me to ask me what should he do with his rentals. No one should ever tell you that rental is a passive income business. In fact, it's getting worse. I see the government introducing a lot of taxation on rental. When those people start paying those taxes, you'll realize it's not as straightforward as it looks. So, and it's certainly not passive income.
Yes.
Yeah, so am I saying that, you know, it's not a way to build wealth? Not necessarily. I'm just saying it's not a way to build passive wealth. It's a business. It's just a business like opening a butchery.
So if you want to get into rentals or if you want to get into farming, both of them, you better do it at a commercial level if you're thinking of it.
Yeah, do it as a business to earn money, then go invest that money.
But isn't I buying an apartment in Kileleshwa, South B, and the likes, and renting it out to someone? Am I not running a business?
You're running a business. Mm-hmm. You're definitely, just be aware you're running a business. You're not doing savings and you're running a business.
Okay.
So there's a very big difference.
Okay.
You can make money by being employed, true?
Yes.
You can make money by owning and running a business.
Yes.
You can make money by, being self-employed. Those are all ways you can make money. But you better realize or earn money. Mm-hmm. But that's then how you earn it. Now, how do you save it and how do you invest it? Mm-hmm. That's a different thing.
So then, would you recommend me to do it or not? That's the question.
At an individual level,
yes,
certainly it's better than using your money than going to do, assets, go buy cars or whatever. Mm-hmm. But as I said, it's a physical asset.
Yes.
Physical assets have their own challenges. Let's talk about your apartment that you're talking about in Kileleshwa.
Yes.
When you own that apartment, the tenant moves out. It may take 3 months to get another tenant, isn't it?
True.
You'll probably use an agent to get the tenant.
Yes.
You have to pay the agent how much?
The first month or 2 months of rent.
Yes.
Or so you will tell you like a percentage of the rent.
So you pay 1 month's rent.
Yes.
So effectively, in that year of 12 months, how many months have you earned your rent?
11 or 10.
Well, if 3 months it was empty, you used 1 month to pay the agent. So how many months have you had your apartment occupied? Yeah. And those are the things you should always look. There are hidden things in all of these things. And that's why I say physical assets are very challenging as a way to really grow wealth in the long term. Whereas financial assets, money market funds, even your circle is something that is easy to grow over a very long time. And wealth is created over time. Wealth is not something you just do overnight. It's something that you create over time. Yeah, and that's the challenge with those physical assets.
What about what he talked about, where you're buying a piece of land in a growing area, and then you will resell it. It will increase in value, and then you'll resell it, because that is one of the first entry points for people when they think about their investment journeys.
Yeah, so, and that is true, and you can resell it, but first and foremost, I don't know, if you look at 80% of idle land, when people try to sell, it can take you even a year or two. That time you had something you wanted done, and you can't do it because it takes you a year or two to actualize that investment.
Yes.
So that's why I'm saying that by the time aren't you better off with a liquid asset where you can get in and get out easily. So that's why we say physical assets are very challenging. Land is even better. When you come to animals, like during the long drought we had, the pastoral communities, they wiped out half their wealth. It just goes, and it's not fungible. It's not like you can, have a cow, then you sell the leg, you say, okay, I'll keep the other body and I'll sell a leg
The
after.
next emergency.
It's not fungible. Yeah. And that's the challenge of physical assets. Yeah. And that's why when you travel, if you go to markets where people have created wealth, it is not in physical assets. Even those physical assets have been converted into financial assets. Think about the real estate investment trusts. That's just a conversion of a physical asset to a financial asset.
Yes.
So a lot of the assets that you will find have been converted into some form of financial asset. Yeah.
All right. So we've learned that if you want to do farming, if you want to do buying land, if you want to buy apartments, do it at a commercial level. Otherwise, if you do it at a subsistence level, then you are not going to make any money. But he wasn't saying that you shouldn't do it. It's just that he wants you to completely understand that there's a difference between active income and passive income. There's a very big difference. So rentals are not passive income because of the amount of time and money and management that goes into it. And then someone else commented that I think this is in response to the concept of having a mansion in the village. So I would rather live in my own house and take 1 hour to drive to work instead of renting in a 20 minutes distance to work or for my kids to school. So this person is very invested in the concept of owning their own house. It doesn't matter even if they're going to drive for 2 hours. So maybe right here you can comment about the concept owning versus renting. What should we do?
Owning versus renting your home, whether you're owning a place that is a bit far.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to owning a home, let's just step back and say the one thing about wealth is that and I had someone talk about legacy, wanting to leave something for your children, then your children's children. Physical assets are very challenging in that way because even if you own, and it is okay to own that home. Now, when you have your 3 kids and they grow up, who are you leaving the house to? Which of the kids? Firstborn. Mutagawa nyumba, bedroom hii ilikuwa yako, hii sitting room is yours, and the land behind there. Just think about it. So, okay.
Then I'll buy many houses for each of my children.
Yeah, okay, that's one solution that you'll. So now, those children, you bought the houses. One goes to work in Nakuru, the other one moves over and moves to Kampala. That's where they settle. The other one settles in Australia. What will those houses you build for them? They'll rent them, I suppose you'd say.
Yes.
They'll rent them.
Yes.
How
they will. rent from whenever they are.
And do you remember my 83-year-old man?
Yes.
When the house, the agent is stealing from them, how will they manage? Let me tell you, do you know even the Kenyans in the diaspora? A lot of them who are being left small tea farms in places, they are selling them. Because if you live in New Jersey, how are you going to manage that asset? 2 acres or 1 acre of tea. How are you going to deal with the hassles of that in your somewhere else? That's the challenge with physical assets. They are so limiting. But if you had shares in the circle, you just leave the shares. You say, I had 3,000 shares, you 1,000, you 1,000, you 1,000. Right? The grandchildren come, you get 300, 300, 300. But you see the value in the circle is growing.
Yes.
So your physical assets have challenges that people don't understand. And that's why it is not even a way to pass on wealth.
But
it is very challenging to pass it on.
In a Kenyan context, we say the reason we are poor is because, for me, especially my grandfather was not busy grabbing the land that. So if you say that, it's not what we were taught. Why? How comes I don't have an inheritance and other people's grandfathers left them an inheritance?
No, you're talking of someone who grabbed. Now that one falls out of my competency of discussion. Let's just talk about people who bought.
Yes.
Yeah, because now if you...
But we were told that they bought some places at 200 shillings per acre. And so you ask, what was my grandfather doing with his 200 shillings?
You know that...
Now it's valued at millions.
You know the reason that people ended up with physical assets is because when people liquidated land or buildings or houses or their properties, they misused the money. So sometimes it was easier to just say, let us keep the land, at least that one nobody is going to misuse.
Yes.
That is the primary thing that drove people to say, let's hold our wealth in physical assets.
Yes.
And especially in land and that kind of thing. That if I keep this money, I will use it.
Yes.
I will go and buy shoes, or I'll go and party, or I'll do whatever it is.
Yes.
But if you manage your financial investments well, they are going to be as helpful to you, if not more helpful than those physical assets. So learning how to manage money, how to save, and it's not a big issue about it, how to never consume the principle. Always use what you're earning from your money, not the principle.
Yes.
Always know that you have to start small, and most of the wealth is created little by little. It's not created by huge step. Then it always grows pole pole.
Yes.
As long as you understand the fundamentals, you shouldn't misuse it. And that's why you don't keep it in the bank. I had someone mention about putting money in equity, and then it was just depreciating. Yes. You put it in a financial, whether a bank account, current account is not a financial asset.
At this point, maybe you can explain what are financial assets and what is the financial market? Because I think at this point, all of us understand that the physical assets now, we understand it's land, rentals, putting up rentals. What else is a physical asset? Animals, if you're chicken,
cows.
Those are the physical assets. So what do we mean by let's cross over to financial assets?
Okay, good question. So maybe I'll use examples.
Yes.
Right, that's the best way. Huh?
Yes.
If you have kids, if you have any dependents, by the way, it's not even kids, even your parents. If the day you start working, you have people who, if something happens to you, those dependents will suffer. Those could be your children, it could be your siblings you educate, it could be your old parents.
Yes.
Then for you, life insurance cover is a financial asset.
Yes.
But not easy mnauziwa education policy. You know, there is something called a term life cover. Term life covers are not expensive.
What is a
Like
term
the
life
ones-
cover?
Okay, I'm not an insurance guy, but basically, a term life cover is a cover that just protects you life
Certain, yeah.
or permanent disability. It doesn't tag in their investment. Those ones which are packaged with investments, education, and all of those, they tend to be very expensive
Yes.
and they may not be necessarily value for money. But if you have dependents, a life insurance policy is a financial asset.
Yes.
It is better than going and saying, goja niende ninunue ile 2 acres. If something happens to me, no, if your parents are old, wataanza kuuza hiyo 2 acres. Okay, if it's your kids you're trying to cover, land cannot be a life insurance policy, surely. So that's one example.
Yes.
Another example, and this one, at least Kenyans, I'm really pleased because Kenya is one of the countries where this has worked so well. SACCOs.
Yes.
SACCOs have been a way of storing a lot of capital
Yes.
and investments. And especially if you're in a well-run SACCO. Of course, we know a few which have been misused, but a well-run SACCO, that's your what do you call them? Your shares and your money there. That's a financial. And by the way, the SACCO is the place to borrow the cheapest money in Kenya. So I always tell people that if you want to keep your emergency funds, put them in a SACCO. Because you can borrow at a very low rate from a SACCO, isn't it?
No, the problem with keeping your emergency fund in a SACCO is access. You don't have access to your savings in a SACCO.
No, but you do have access. You can borrow
Against your...
So if you're looking for somewhere where you can borrow
Yes.
without having to pay a very huge interest,
Yes.
SACCO is a good option.
Yes.
Right? Money market funds. Of course, in Kenya, unfortunately, equities haven't done well. But equities is a good is a financial asset. Things like Vuka are financial assets.
Yes.
The reason equities haven't done well in Kenya, and so most people are not in the equities market.
And what is the equities market?
I mean the capital markets, and Nairobi Stock Exchange.
Yes.
Shares.
Yeah, because I'm sure there's someone in this audience who doesn't understand that.
Yeah. The Nairobi Securities Exchange, unfortunately, and I even have, it's probably a month or 2 ago, the CMA held its annual, conference for getting stakeholder feedback.
Yes.
This is something I tell everybody. If we don't revive our Nairobi Securities Exchange, we're not going to create wealth in this country. And the reason we are not going to create wealth is that it's the primary place where wealth is created in any nation that is developed. It is the capital markets. Yes. Now ours, unfortunately, we messed it up. We messed it. How did we mess our Nairobi Securities Exchange? Most of you are pretty young, but a few people here were around. I heard about the Kenyan IPO. They were around in the mid-2000s when the capital markets were vibrant and doing very well. Only between 1995 to about 2005, capital markets was in fact, a lot of wealth was tied in the capital markets. We've pulled a lot of that wealth out. What happened to pull it out? It was the Safaricom IPO that messed the Nairobi Securities Exchange.
When people borrowed against.
Exactly.
Yes.
So everyone pulled out, but we must go back. What we need are aggregators to help us to go back.
Yes.
That is where wealth is created. It is one of the primary places. Some of you have heard me speak about the US capital markets. I've spoken at the New York Stock Exchange. 43 million American households hold accounts that are related to their capital markets. That's why those guys are where they are. Because 43 million households in a country of 300 million, it means that if a household is 3.5 people, half the Americans have somehow participated.
Yes.
But as we are not participating, we just keep who comes there? BlackRock, Fidelity, all those foreigners. And then they come they come in and come out. Come in and come out, depending on how the Kenya shilling is performing. But that's not sustainable. So we are going to get there one of these days, but we have to start that journey.
Yes.
And that journey is telling Kenyans, get out of these physical assets. Move. Last time I said $120 billion tied in idle land in Nairobi.
Yes.
That money should be in the capital markets. Then we would have a vibrant capital markets. But now it's tied in unproductive land. And Kenyans are not. I mean, we used to have almost 2 million Kenyans participating at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. It's gone to under 100,000. Out of the 18 million Kenyans that are working.
100,000.
Yeah, it then makes sense. That's why we can't build this place, because we killed it. And that was a mistake, to get people to borrow money
to
buy shares. You can never take a loan to go create a financial to go buy a financial asset. You can't do it through a loan. You have to do it through what you're saving. It cannot be done through a loan.
Because that's a very common question, actually. Every day someone will ask, should I go take a loan from the SACCO or from the bank to buy a bond? Or should I go take a loan from SACCO or bank to buy Safaricom shares?
That's what happened. The banks gave people forms. Those who were old enough can remember. 2.5 million Kenyans participated in the IPO. And, we are talking back maybe more than 15, 16, 17 years. Then the share was, I can't remember whether it was 5 bob. Yeah? Those who remember, was it 5? At IPO. But a few weeks after IPO, it went to 4, then it went to 3 shillings. 2 bob. What happened? The bank started calling, hey, come on. You now need to come top up. This loan, the security you gave us is not, you bought shares worth 100,000, now they are worth 40.
40 bob, yes.
And Kamau is like, but you're holding those shares. Yeah, but they are not enough for your loan. Then every end of month, unakatwa mshahara, because you have to pay interest on this loan. Within months, Kenyans sold their shares. They were bought by foreign investors. That share recovered, went off to get to 20, 30 shillings. They made the money. On behalf of who? US pensioners and people like you, but sitting in the US, not Kenyans. Because capital markets investment is normally done through aggregators. You don't go direct. So let me give an example.
Yes.
When you buy a money market fund is an aggregator. Mm-hmm. When you go to CIC or wherever you buy a money market, all CIC is doing aggregation.
Collecting money and then investing on our behalf.
They are called collective investment vehicles.
Yes.
Because the challenge when you go your own self, mm-hmm. you can't deal with these highs and lows. Capital markets, equities behave like this.
Yes.
So you will stand to, when they are down like the 2 bob, you didn't hold. But you see, if you had entered an equity fund and you had not borrowed, you'd have gone to your fund manager and he tells you, just relax, my friend. This thing is going to recover. Mm. That wealth would have been made by Kenyans.
Yes.
But it went through. That's why when you go to New York, guys are living funky lives. Yeah, because they don't own their wealth in physical assets.
Yes.
When you start working, when you go to work, the first thing you're done is your HR gives you a list of certified financial planners in your area. They tell you about the mutual funds. They tell you about the 401k plan. Those are where you put your money. You take a life insurance if you have a dependent. That's what you need to do. Those are financial assets. Kenyans we need to move back into the financial assets from the physical assets. A lot of these physical assets, even if you go to here, Karen, Muthaiga, Lavington, Kileleshwa, do you know there are abandoned properties in those areas? You may not know because maybe you don't look. But they are proper. That's where the conmen are now operating. They come, they know this haina mtu. Because the last owner, he died, his kids were somewhere in the world, they just left it there. So they are not, you can't move them around, you can't pass them on from generation to generation, which is the way wealth is created.
Yes. Okay.
So that's the challenge of these physical assets. Now, does it mean you don't go and buy your own house to live in? You go buy it, but just realize it's an emotional.
It's an emotional part.
And it's okay. See, when I was taking a glass of wine, I don't have to take it.
Mm.
But don't call it an investment. I mean, just say I've made an emotional decision. I like it, like to see. But don't think of it as how you will build your wealth or your investments or how you will pass it on to the next generation. And passing wealth to the next generation is very critical to, by the way, creating wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Passing wealth because this thing called power of compounding. I've heard you talk about power of compounding.
Yes.
Power of compounding, what are the two factors that affect it? What are the two things that affect compounding? Time and the rate of earnings, isn't it? If you're earning 10% or 20%. They're the only two things.
Yes.
Now, this 10-20 is a place you can't play too much unless you take some crazy risks.
Yes.
So time is your best.
Is what you have in control.
Is what you have in control.
Yes.
And that's why you find a lot of those markets, people are wealthy. You find that the grandfather left the children, a mutual fund somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys continue to grow that.
Yes.
And the next generation continues to grow that.
Yes.
And before you know it, I can give you a very good example. If you had $1 million shillings in 1924, and I've chosen 1924 because it's exactly 100 years ago, yeah? So we are in 2024. If you had $1 million shillings, invested it at 10% per annum, how much would it be today? It's approximately 13 billion shillings. That's just compounding. That means if a grandfather, so let's do the numbers. Let's work on a practical example, because you know that probably these discussions is everyone has an argument for what.
For and against, yeah.
So let's take my example. You take that 1 million that was left by this great grandfather.
Get your calculator.
It is growing. He put it in a mutual fund that has been earning 10 million shillings. Mm-hmm. 10%.
Yes.
Since then to now. That is 13 billion. But he could have still had that same million and had 100 acres. Okay? Bought 100 acres. So one grandfather, great grandfather, because this is 100 years. Bought a mutual fund, the other one bought 100 acres. This grandfather had 5 kids. Mm-hmm. Then those 5 kids had 5 kids. So how many in total? Assuming, no. The 5 kids had each 5 kids. We are now, that family is 25. Isn't it? And now we come to the current generation, they are a bit more conservative. Each had 3. So now how many descendants are there from that grandfather? 75. Now take the 100 acres, divide it by 75. What does each of them get? Take the 13 billion, divide it by 75. Why is there silence anyway? Maybe it's not, maths are not adding, but
they are calculating.
It's the problem. Now, if you look at those financial assets, why is America so wealthy? America was a third world country when they got their independence. Why is it the richest country in the world? They're the best at creating financial assets. In fact, they are too good at it. Sometimes they overdo it, like what they did in the financial crisis, creating those collateralized debt obligations. But they just, put them in something called a troubled assets thing, and they continued building more financial assets. It doesn't make sense, guys. So which grandfather was the smarter great-grandfather? Because now, even if these 75 are scattered for most people today in Kenya, if you were to track back to your great-grandfather, you people are scattered all over the world. Am I correct in saying that? When people form those committees, I see them, what's up? Someone passes away, a grant, you see someone is plus 44, plus. Have you ever been in those groups? The people all over the world. How would that 100 acres in Olkalau help the guy who's in, Zurich? So that's how wealth is created. Wealth is just time. That's part of it. In fact, most of it you just make slowly, but it's just time.
Yes.
Time is the big, big, big friend of wealth creation. And financial assets that's how wealth. If you even go to places like Singapore, Japan, there's nobody who has a plot, but they are so rich.
Yes, that's
true. So you
true.
have to start asking yourself, what is it they are doing that we are not doing? It is all for there to see.
Are we learning? Do we have questions?
No.
Okay. So, if we are learning and we have questions, yes, please. Yes, let's give him a second to. You can? Okay, all right. So, do we have questions? We don't have another mic, so I'll pass mine, and so that it's a direct conversation with the CEO.
So I might have not mentioned this before, but my dream was to retire at 40. That's next year. We haven't. We're nowhere close to that. So what would you recommend would be the right financial assets to invest in over the next 10 years to be able to say I can retire comfortably? And by comfortably, I don't mean private jet. I'm looking at that like in my 60s. But like comfortably, like my kids can go to private school. I own a nice home. I have good health care. There's some trust fund money I put aside for them. Yeah.
So 40 is a bit challenging because now you're saying you own next 10 years. Remember the challenge. So yesterday I was speaking somewhere and they asked me to talk similar, but talk it's slightly different. It was we're talking about what you'd advise your 21-year-old self. When you are 21, now you're no longer 21. I'm no longer 21. The thing is that, as I said, because creating wealth is a pole time thing. 10 years is a very short time in that, that kind of thing. But obviously, you can go build yourself a very successful business. I had you earlier talk about doing, was it fashion? Yeah. You can think about how to build that into something that one day you can sell. And but having said that, do you know you never have enough money? It never happens. So what is very critical in wealth creation or all this is that you start small. Always start, even if it is small, just get started. That's what I tell you, just get started. At whatever age, just start. You will still be better off 10 years from now than where you'd be if you do not start. So the first thing is to just start. It doesn't matter if you start with little money or a lot of money, because this thing is about time and about little by little. So often people say, I will start when I have enough. But it's never enough and never will be. So the key is just to start. But I would say at 40, you need to think about something like a business you can launch or do that will make you, either you'll sell it in 10 years' time and cash out and put that now into your investment account. Because there are many people also who are doing that. They build businesses. Now, unfortunately, of course, because we have killed our capital markets. That's where people should be selling their businesses. But a lot of times that's not even an option today. But we are hopeful. We are working on it. We think the people who can make this happen are listening, so that in future, but because that's what people do in America, they build business and sell. They even sell their restaurants. I run a restaurant, then when I get to 60, I sell it to the next guy. I put that cash in a money market fund or a mutual fund. And that's my retirement plan. So, and remember that 85% of us in Kenya do not have a formal job. So you either have a business you started. So when you start that business, I started a business. I'll tell you, you start it with a view to how you can sell it. Otherwise, if it dies with you, then you have probably gotten rid of your retirement package right there and then. So, build businesses that you can sell. That would be my advice.
I had a question. I'm very interested in the stock market, and I read about BlackRock coming to Kenya. So what do you think motivated them to come at this time when our economy is not doing very well? What is it that they're seeing that we are not seeing as Kenyans?
Okay, so so the world's largest money managers, the BlackRocks, the Fidelities, the Vanguards of this world, the way they invest, first and foremost, it's literally a computer that is investing. It's not human beings. So these decisions are not very much intervened by people. They look at, they invest using what is called an index. So in Kenya, we've got the NSE index, but they would not use the NSE index. Those foreign investors only buy about 7-6 stocks on the Nairobi Stock Exchange that have either very good dividends. Most of them are dividend plays, especially when the Kenya shilling, like now, had appreciated. When the interest rates had gone up, you saw how our bond was oversubscribed, yeah? The infrastructure bond and the Euro bonds, because they can see here they will make a good return. So those guys, but the challenge with them is they go and come out. And whenever they come out, the market slumps. So you can never sustain a stock exchange in your country by foreigners only. It has to be, today our NSE trading is probably 70-80% foreign, 60, and 40% is local. So it should be the other way around. It should be 80% local. Then it would be stable. So right now it's very, very, very volatile because of that reason. But the solution is not for us to stay away. The solution is for us to go in. There are those stocks that are good stocks, because even if the share price goes down, they pay dividends. And over a long time, especially if you're young, if you're below 35, those stocks are always a good place to invest your money, because over a long time, they will get back to where they should be. They're not the best if you're 60, and because then you don't have a lot of runway ahead of you. Okay, if you use normal mortality, because even 35-year-old, something can happen, but I'm just saying generally, because I'm just giving very general, I'm not being specific today, yeah. But they see those stocks, the Safaricoms, they'll pay good dividends, Equity Bank, They look at those and they'll buy those. Yeah, they don't buy everything there. So they only buy, out of the 30, because out of the listings, because also our NSC needs to clean up a little bit. We have stocks there that should fall out of the main board. So that we need to do some cleanup. But a lot of this is historical, but keeping away is not part of the solution. 10, 15 years ago, money market funds were very small. I don't have the latest numbers, but I think now we are approaching between 150 billion to 200 billion. Kenyans are putting in money market. That's a good thing, by the way, because those are financial assets.
Hi again. Thank you so much for this talk. Thank you, Agatha. I want to take you back to a question that Agatha had posed to you. And you always advise, not to put all your eggs in one basket. So if you're to diversify your portfolio, would you then advise that having a yin-yang balance of physical assets and financial assets will be good? And in regard to that, for example, if you're looking at a physical asset, let's say you build a home, but in this situation, you try to diversify it in such a way you have a piece of land, let's say it's a 50 by 100, and then you build maybe rentals, 3-4 stories, and you live in one of them and you're renting the others. So maybe in future, if you have kids, each one gets an apartment. But you get my drift here. So in terms of that yin and yang balance, would then having, this kind of a physical asset be a good choice? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's a good question, but let me clarify. Let me start by clarifying. I'd never advise putting in one basket. I guess you're seeing financial assets as one basket, but they are not actually one basket. I'd never say put 100% of your investment in SACCO or in this. You need to diversify. In fact, I always tell people you have to diversify. Right now, because government bonds have been paying very high rates, there are some people with 90% of their wealth tied or, on those bonds. But if they asked their cousins in Ghana and Zambia what happened to their government bonds, they would realize it's a bad idea. So even within financial assets, there is loads of them. And you should diversify across financial assets, not one asset. Now, when you talked about the apartments you build, then you live in one, it's better than doing nothing, by the way. But still, it's not as good as financial assets. That's my point. It's okay, but it's not as good as financial assets. Let me try and tell you why now. Let's take your example about this apartment which you live in with then you have your kids. You see, I keep reminding people, but again, we are now just seeing, remember the way life plays out. The house you need when you have kids is not the same one you need when you grow old. Neither is it the one you need when you are young. You will find a lot of people, so if you had a 3-4 bedroom, but now you're alone, you need a 1 bedroom or even a 2 bedroom. So a lot of, that's why I was saying you have this family home you built, but again, when you grow old, many people either their parents have retired back, some of them in the rural areas. Those who are in Nairobi and their parent lives in a big compound, and there is one parent left there. Sometimes even security becomes a problem. So there are a lot of issues around those physical assets. And yes, you can pass them on to your kids. It is fine, but it is not as easy. That's the point, as financial assets. That's where the issue is. It's not as easy. Is it doable? Yeah, and people are doing it, but it's not as easy.
Okay, so her question, she wants to know, should she do both, where she has the physical assets and she has the financial assets? So let's say her net worth is 15 million. Is it okay for her to have 7 million in physical assets and 8 million in financial assets? Would that be a good thing?
I got it. Maybe I hadn't quite understood the question. So I think you've heard of the third rule kind of things. Third, you can put in real assets. Third, you can put in, liquid assets. Third, you can put in equities. So yes, there are a lot of people who, because they have so much cash. Let me give you a good example. Most hotels in the world are not owned by the people who manage those hostels. I don't know if you know that. Marriott, Hilton. When you see these guys, they don't own the hotels they manage. If you go to Dubai and see all those hotels, they are not owned by the managers. So who owns them? Those assets are normally owned by people who have a very different problem. They have too much cash, too much liquid. So they buy these hotels as a way to park money purely for capital appreciation. They are not looking for the annual return. The guy who makes the money from running the hotel is not the guy who owns the building. It's the Marriott. But this guy has parked that money because after 15 years, they'll sell that hotel and make the capital appreciation. Because, of course, what is happening to the property, its value is appreciating as the amount of dollars per bed you have to pay for a bed. If that bed was $100 10 years ago, today it's $200. So if you have too much cash and too much, you can park some of it in real assets, yes, as a way to diversify. But the reality is that in Africa, we have the opposite problem. That's the reality. Those are problems that are held by a different set of people. Yeah. So, like now, pension funds, for example, in Kenya, we have got a lot of pension funds in Kenya. Today, we have over 32 pension funds in Kenya that have invested up to 5 billion shillings into the Acorn I-REITs. Those are pension funds because they have a lot of cash. And where do they deploy this cash? They need to deploy it to earn, and they can't put it all in one side of things. But you see, unless you're a pension fund, for most individuals, that's not the situation you'll tend to find yourself. But yes, if you find yourself in the happy situation where you're so liquid, it's too much, now it's popping out of the mouth and ears, then you can pack it into real assets. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Ade. I had two questions. Luckily enough, one of them has already been answered because it was about the diversification of physical assets and financial assets. Fortunately, you've given a more detailed response because mine was a yes or no question. Which one do we pick? Either of the two. So the second one is basically just to seek clarification on something you have mentioned, because I'm particularly interested on your idea of reviving the capital markets. You mentioned about having an aggregator. So I would like you just to take through what would be the best case scenario of reviving the Nairobi Securities Exchange.
Yeah, thanks. We need to get the what do they call them? The mutual funds and the equity. When you go to buy mutual funds, there is money markets. There is also equities via of balanced. We need to get those equity ones going again. Most of the people who have them, they are very inactive because people pulled out. Because people are not properly explained to when you're buying an equity fund. It's like I tell my team, when you go to sell Vuka, please do not mis-sell it. Don't sell it to someone who needs that money after 6 months. You see, so these are things you have to sell it properly so that people put the right pack of money into there. But those those equity funds, they are not very active right now. And we are trying to encourage the people who have those equity funds to revive them so that we can revive. That's the best way. And if we can't revive the existing one, people should create. I would do it. If I was not doing what I do, I can do it. But you say I can't do everything in the world. So you have to decide what you want to solve. But we need, if that's an area with a lot of potential, reviving the equity funds. They're all these fund managers and banks, they have them, but they are not active right now. Yeah.
Hello, hi, my name is Faith. 3 years ago, I was living in Qwetu, and I'm so glad for Agatha. Right now, I own units in Qwetu. And together, the interview Elvis and Agatha did the last time, they were talking about my question is mainly on Vuka. They were talking about the units on Vuka, and they were a bit of clarifying that you don't own like nyumba Vuka, you just own shares and units. So my question is, right now I am 23, and I am so lucky that I live with my parents at the moment. But maybe 5 or a few years down the line, I will want to move out of that space. So the question is there a platform, is there a way that Vuka can diversify, is planning to diversify so that if I have maybe $1 million worth of shares by the end of the time I'm planning to move out, I can maybe own my own personal unit, a household unit, not just shares, so that I think the biggest worries of Kenyans ni nitalipaje rent. Even if you lose your job today, you're just like, rent is the first thought. So to ease that worry of how do I pay my own rent, maybe there can be something that can bridge that gap.
Okay. I don't think Vuka will be solving for that your issue, but you can use your units, obviously, sell them and put them as a deposit for the house you want to buy, or the unit you want to buy. But home ownership in Kenya, okay, let's put it this way. Home ownership in Nairobi, it's cheaper to rent than to own. I don't know if you know that.
Thank you for that information.
It's cheaper to rent than to own in Nairobi. You struggle with that. It's cheaper to rent than to own. Do you want me to explain why?
Yes, please.
No, even if you don't. So if you buy a house of 5 million, okay, let's maybe use this. Yeah. So it's okay. Let's use 10 million because it's an easier number to work with. Do you know how much it would cost to rent that house of 5 million in Nairobi? A 10 million house in Nairobi, how much do you think it rents for? Doesn't really, location kidogo, but then really, the math works the same way. So let me help you calculate it. The average rental yield the average yield of a house in Kenya, in Nairobi, is like around 5%. So what's 5% of 10 million? It's 500,000. Divide by 12.
Okay.
Huh? So that's the rent of that house. The rent of that house is about 40,000. Now, if you had the same 5 million, how much is money markets paying you? 13-14% of 5 million is how much? Okay, you guys can help me there. It's about 1.3 million. 13% of 10 million. So aren't you better putting your 500, what 10 million shillings into that fund, you earn 1.3 and you pay rent of 500,000. Okay. The reason why it's different in America or in England or those markets, Australia, is this, that the yield of a house is much higher than the cost of debt. Okay. Now people don't do those numbers. Yeah, you just go and see people own. Even the World Bank, it took them a long time to start understanding what the problem is. Did you hear? The yield of the house is higher than the loan. So that 10 million house, if it was in America, you would buy it with a loan that is costing 3% or even 2%. So what's 2% of 10 million? It's 200,000. But renting the same house is 500,000. So why would you rent it? Wouldn't you rather take a loan and own it? That's the maths of home ownership. It's just that, and that's why Kenya has very few mortgages. And they won't move. I don't want to be hard by but they won't move that much because it's a structural problem. What we call, that's a financial structural problem where the yield, so unless the loans come below 5%, it wouldn't make sense for most people. Now, most people don't know how to do that much, but that's why they don't take those mortgages. They say mortgage is expensive, but they can't tell you why. They know intrinsically in their head that take it too, but obviously if you work for a bank and you're able to access a mortgage at 5% or 6%, then maybe it starts to make sense.
Sorry again for all the hands that were up. Just to follow up on this mortgage talk. Now you have so many companies that, still on the cultural way of physical assets, and that they sell you now a rent to own. So, you're young, like she said, you're thinking, where am I going to get the rent? You don't even know about MMFs or how to, multiply your money over time. So then you're thinking, okay, instead of now being in debt, I live here and the rent I'm paying is like I'm earning it, because at the end of it, it's going to be mine. So instead of living somewhere and you're paying rent for 2, maybe 5 years, at the end of it, if you walk away, you're walking away with a unit. You have a lot of people selling. I've had someone tell that to me, actually.
Yeah, but I don't have the specifics, but when you go and calculate, it will still be more expensive. At the end of the day, in Kenya, there is no way to make the maths of owning lower than renting because of what I have explained.
I got you.
Yeah, it will always, when you do the number, you'll always, and by the way, this culture, that you have to own your own home, do you know it's not widespread everywhere in the world? In continental Europe, nobody owns their house they live in. Those countries, Switzerland, France, Germany, people rent for life. It's okay. There's no reason why you have to own them, especially if you build your financial assets. The day you stop working, they pay your rent for the rest of your life, and you leave that financial asset to your children, earning. So it's not necessarily, especially now in the US, in the UK, the government wanted people to own. So they have always made sure, except the last few years, after COVID, the interest rates went high. People stopped buying homes, actually, even in the US, because of the interest rates. Those countries have made sure they have structured their economies such that the borrowing rate is lower than the rent. So you prefer to rent. But even those markets, the costs of home ownership are going so high that now more people are starting to rent. Now, in Africa, the governments aren't able to do that because they need to borrow from the domestic market to pay their bills. So that's why they keep keeping the risk-free rate. That's why they pay so much interest on, because they need the money to fund their budget deficit. So it's hard for us to get out of it in Africa. That's why home ownership hasn't taken off the way that it should have. And as I said, it's okay. By the way, it's okay to make emotional decisions, but just know you're making an emotional decision, not a financial decision. It's not like there's anything wrong with that.
The beginning started by telling us that financial literacy is about trying to avoid being in debt as much as possible. But there are situations where you have to take a loan to do something. So the question is, if you have Vuka units, can they be used as security when you take a loan?
At the moment, no. But I know that teams are working to work with banks and circles so that you can be able to do that.
Good evening. Thank you for the talk. I wanted to know, you mentioned about capital markets and how for anyone under 35, that's the best thing to be doing right now. How would you advise one to select the companies to invest in out of all the options you have in the Nairobi Stock Exchange?
How would I advise? Well, I would encourage you to, if you have a money market fund account, it's probably being managed by a fund manager. These fund managers will probably tell you the best stocks to buy on the exchange. There are just about 7 or 8 stocks that are really investment grade on the NSE. Some I mentioned, the usual suspects, the multinationals, the banks, Safcom, so and those are always going to perform well because the underlying business that they are in has very, very strong fundamentals. Yeah, or that is one, or they are very well run. They're extremely well run. Yeah. So I don't want to name specific, go by this one. But the top 8 are generally known. In fact, someone asked about BlackRock and Fidelity. They buy those ones. They don't touch anything else. When they come to Kenya, they only buy those shares. They don't buy. That's why they are the liquid ones. They're the highly liquid ones because those are the ones people buy. We need to clean the exchange. There's stocks there that should not be listed. But that's a job that I believe the NSE is looking at how to solve. Yeah.
Thank you once again for your talk. My question is more directed on the next generation because right now we are a small group. I believe there are parents here. And so my question would be, what advice you would have for maybe teachers, parents, and even schools so that we can ensure that the next generation, when you say that for us we are young when we have started investing, by the time the other kids who are teenagers right now, they are small children, how can we also help them learn that by the time they're growing up, don't focus on the land, don't focus on the house, start investing in financial markets when you're young?
It's a pity that we teach in schools everything except financial literacy. The stuff we are discussing here is about financial literacy. I'm sure you've had a few things today that probably you hadn't thought about. Yet we weren't taught. We don't teach them, okay, someone told me, but even in the West, they don't teach it in school. True, but they teach it at home. The dinner table, people are talking about the mutual fund they bought and the 401k plan and the life insurance. They are not talking about plot, sio kimau. They are talking about, there are discussions in the dining room and in the living rooms of those homes is about financial literacy. That's why those guys, they don't go to any school. Here, I wish we would teach it so that people go to work day one. It's taken me the better part of 25 years to understand all the things I'm talking to you about. But I wish I knew them 25 years ago. You know, I guess that's why I love what Agatha is doing. This whole concept, and whenever she wants me to speak, I make time, because if we do not start telling our people how wealth is created and how it is passed on, then we will never, but the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. Rome was never built in a day. So we have to get there step by step. And we are getting better. Like I said, the money market uptake, I really love to see what's happening in the money market space, because for many years it wasn't taking off. Insurance companies need to put their act together to stop selling people all these products. Like there are these products, if you stop paying, you lose it. So those are the things killing insurance uptake in Kenya. We need people to just take term life insurance. That's what we need to make sure that everybody who has a dependent, so that we are not always doing harambes. And being, poverty is a terrible thing, because you continue to make the same mistakes. You leave children who are dependents, then we have to raise money to take care of those children, because nobody told you you could have a life cover for them. So then, it's all these things. When they combine together, they just continuously, make us, look. And I told someone the other day, it surprises me how when someone passes on, people raise money so quickly for a funeral in 5 days, but the hospital bill, when they're in hospital, we don't raise that money that quickly. I started today's event by telling you we are very wealthy as a continent. We, even as a country, even as a people, we just make the wrong financial decisions because nobody is telling you about it. It is not anything else. It's nobody told you start small. You're earning 15K, start with 500. Don't try, just start then, because if you start at 21, it's much easier that you're more likely that when you get to 55, 60, you'll have enough to live on, even if you're renting. So it's just making the wrong financial, and then products that have been sold that really take advantage of people. So then you lose faith in it. And you say, hiyo ni mbaya. It's not necessarily. It's just how things have been presented, financial education, financial literacy. If we get more Agathas, we will spread the word. Yeah, because it's when people know, it's not hard to make the right decision if you know. Oftentimes nobody is telling you.
Thank you very much. I have one question on the Vuka investment. Bearing in mind that you're competing for investment with the treasury bills, the treasury bonds, the money market, what is the next big thing? What should make me, as a Vuka investment, excited to belong in this platform? What that one thing that is coming up that when I go home, I tell my husband, I was in a Vuka talk this evening, and I'm excited that next year we will have ABCD. What is the next thing that is coming up? Another thing is the lady talked about wanting to move out of her parents' house. I would like to know, is Vuka thinking about diversifying? You're talking about student rental houses, maybe into conference halls, into other they call building investments.
Okay. So first and foremost, and I don't say this to dampen your spirit when you go home, talk to your husband. Investment is, most of the good investments, they are not those exciting, things that, in fact, I see these things that come with a lot of fanfare and excitement. And I always say here, there's some hidden thing. Investment and savings is about kidogo kidogo hujaza. Kidogo kidogo hujaza. You actually don't even, you look back and you surprise yourself at how much you have been able to save or reach. Many people have SACCO accounts, even me, I have a SACCO. I never even look at it, but sometimes I check how much. I'm surprised, but it's kidogo kidogo hujaza kibaba. So when it comes to a product, and when I talk, I don't come here marketing Vuka. Their team, with Vuka has a place for everybody who is interested. I want to talk about financial literacy and investments and savings in whatever area or place you can go. It's the one thing you should always remember about investments and this kind of things is that, especially for individual investors, forget institutional investors, individual investors, what you want is something that is earning you above inflation. Because then you're creating wealth. But this thing of chasing products that are also telling you, they'll give you 17%, they're probably a very risky products to give you those type of returns. We have been talking today about BlackRock and Fidelity and Vanguard. Those funds are extremely big today, $10 trillion plus. They hold the money of millions and millions of Americans and Europeans who invest kidogo kidogo. How were they created? They were created in the early 70s when some people did some research and discovered that actually, if you just invest on the New York Stock Exchange Index, you've heard of the S&P 500 or the FTSE 100. You hear about those things. That if you just invest on the index, over the long term, 100 years, 50 years, you will get a return around 8%. And those countries, their inflations are around 2-3%. So that is when now funds stopped being actively invested, and they put them in those index funds. They just track those index. That's why when someone asked me so they have created an index for Kenya. They just track that index. That's how they invest. So if in Kenya you get an investment that gets you anything between 10 and 12% total return, whether it's cash and capital appreciation, be okay. Because our inflation tends to be around 5-6%. That will build you wealth over the long haul. So what is my point? My point is that the key takeaways you should maybe take is that, one, that wealth is created over time. Two, it's created by investing kidogo kidogo. That to me is the most. Now people look for excitement. What's the next excitable thing? I say, don't do investment that way. This thing is about just, slowly, you build up your pie. Most of those things guys do to go speculate, you end up losing your money. And now once you lose, trying to build again becomes extremely difficult. I missed the second question. It was
of right now you're dealing with students accommodation.
Or us.
Yes.
Or we are going to do young professional housing.
Yes.
Soon coming. But whether we'll do shops or offices, and we won't build those. We may manage those, but we won't build those. But yeah, we will do other rental segments as well, not just students.
My question is two-pronged. And this one, I want you to, in very layman terms, dumb it down so that the 20-year-old will be able to understand. And I joined Vuka about 2 years ago. Agatha, I stand correct. I think about 2 years ago. And I'm not casting a stone or anything, but it was the 9.4% kind of assurance of interest, I think, on dividends or something like that. But when you look at it, and I know for sure that this is a long-term investment, like you keep insisting, but on the short term of that 2 and a couple of months, years, like for this year, for example, has been quite low. Could you maybe dumb it down for us to understand some of the challenges that cause that volatility for moving from that expected probably 9.4% to probably 5.6 exactly? And this is a conversation we had. That's why Agatha is actually joining in. Make us understand, we expect this probably in another coming year or so, and for us to be comfortable to say, okay, let's keep on, let's hold on, let's keep on topping up our dividends. Yeah, and the second one, I said it's up two-pronged. The second one is looking outward into markets abroad. The REITs in the US, I joined through proxy some groups that are looking at investing international markets, the REITs in the US, etc. And they're saying, especially now when the markets are looking so bad, the economy is just doing so poorly, it's the best time to keep buying those things. What's your take on that? Yes, we're going to have Vuka, no questions asked. But if we want to invest in these other things, what's your take on that? For example, REITs in the US or financial assets like we were talking about.
So, I can't now remember when we launched Vuka, but I know we launched the REITs in 2021. So they've been around for 3 years. So if you take, they launched at 20 bob. That's the launch price. And then, so 3 years at 10%, what should you have made cumulatively? If you take just 1.1 to the power of 3 should give you the number. I don't have it off the top of my head. Should give you the total return you should have made from the dividends and the capital appreciation. So basically, we can try it. It's not too difficult. If it was 20 shillings, like 2021, 2022, you do 10% of 20 shillings, you get 22 shillings, then you do 10%, you get 24 shillings, so maybe 26 shillings. So today, the way you should look at Vuka is the price of the unit. I don't know what it is right now. Plus all the dividends that have been paid since. That's how you should add it up. And you'll find, of course, Vuka didn't start in 2021. I think we launched it in 2022. But that's how, the same way the pension fund is looking at it. So they have gotten appreciation of, you said it's 22? I don't, so 22 shillings on appreciation, and they should have gotten about 3 shillings in dividends, 3 to 4 shillings. That's how your 10% is created. And that's it, because it's the return on your dividend, the cash you get back, and the capital appreciation combined. The yield alone can never be 9%. And will never be. Those you will find 9 to 13%, those are money market. But in money market, there is no capital appreciation. And that's why we say that's on average the return you should expect. But so you'll put some money in your money market, some money in Vuka, maybe some money in your circle, like that. That's how you should think about it. But it will not. And that's why I gave you that example of you remember my 1 million and the great-grandfather. Because this thing is just a matter of giving it time. But that's the challenge here. We don't see that time. That it takes, it's just kidogo hujaza kibaba. And we are not saying that we're not doing, that's why I said with financial assets, you diversify. Don't be only in one. Because also today, in fact, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, those money markets were at 6%. They've just come back up in the last few years, and they're going to go down again. So it's in Kenya, if you get investments that are giving you 10 to 12% over a 10-year horizon, you're doing okay. You're doing fine. You're just fine. There's no need to go chase those high yield things that are extremely high risk. You end up wiping out the return plus your capital, like so many people have ended up doing. Yeah, I don't know if so. That's the way to look at it, and for me, that's what I encourage people to look at, because it's a long-term game. It's the longer the better. It's kidogo kidogo, because where our inflation is. So if you have an investment in Kenya that's giving you 5-6% total return, you're just basically clearing inflation. So you're not building anything above. Remember I told you about the US guys, how they buy homes, that they have a yield of 4% on their house, they're paying a loan of 2%. What they're making is 2%, but over the 30 years of ownership, the equity they create in their home is very substantial. But they're just making a differential of 2-3%. Yeah.
She had another question about investing.
Yeah. And offshore investments are also not a bad thing. But again, for individuals, better go with aggregators like Mansa. You've heard of Mansa? That's an aggregator. Rather than going yourself individually, because your quantum is too small. The costs of managing the transactions and all of that, it doesn't make sense. And then you have a day job selling land. So you'd rather sell your land and let the Mansa do your offshore investments, for example. Mansa, by the way, is another financial instrument that gives you exposure to international investment options. And that's what I was saying. So if you go out there, you will find most individuals, they go through an aggregator. They don't go directly. Even BlackRock is an aggregator. Even Fidelity is an aggregator. Even Vanguard, they're just aggregators of retail investor capital. So that US retail investor in Manhattan does not have to come and buy the shares here. He can just buy a Fidelity unit, emerging markets unit, and it is investing here.
Okay, so our question was, as investors in Vuka, and as we've already established, it's a long-term investment. Is there assurance? What we were asking is, right now Vuka is mainly involved in student accommodation. So I'm thinking, in the future, let's say 5 years, 10 years from now, will you create another SPV that will now take up maybe young professionals, and then now that will yield higher, right? But us will have put our money in student accommodation, which may not be yielding as much, or would Vuka have like a mixed bag of different investment options?
From everything I know about real estate, 27 years, and whatever I know about investment, I don't think in Kenya you can deliver income generating real estate assets that are more than that 10 to 12 overall return without going. In our development REIT, we do even 30%, but the risks there are crazy. You can also lose to zero. We cannot put individual investors, only institutional investors. Even in the yields, when we come to young professionals, they will be around the same. And they'll be in the same basket. It's not like they'll be in another basket. They'll still be within the Vuka basket. So they are not, we won't have in Vuka. And can tell you, and I tell the team they know, I say, guys, please sell things properly. Don't missell to people. There are places you can go and get 30% returns, but the risks is that you can even lose your capital. You know, one of the things, maybe it's a good way to close today. The one thing you must look at in investments is trying to preserve your capital. Try to be careful to preserve the capital. Forget the return. Let's now put the return kando kabisa. If you own, and that's where, like now REITs, asset-backed investments are very critical in anybody's portfolio because it preserves your capital. Equities are very good. You've heard me talk about them, and I think people should take them up. The challenge with equities is that you can lose your capital. And that's why you have to diversify. Because in equities, if you own shares in Uchumi, how much are they worth today? Someone knows. And Kenya Airways, before it is revived, what are they? Yeah. KQ. They're not out. Are the river cement? Yeah. So in equities, you can get your capital to zero. In asset-backed securities like REITs, you preserve the building is there and it's fully insured. Even if it burnt down, it's going to get paid for. So capital preservation in asset-backed securities is very high. But it doesn't give you, but on the other side, equities can even give you a 30% return, but they can wipe your capital. Money market challenge is those interest rates drop, your coupon is your coupon. So you know, the inflation can erode it, your return. Even those who are making 12, 13, today, inflation is 5 to 6. It's eating 5 to 6. But at least you're now well above that. But we also know 3 years ago, those same money markets were at 9. Are we together? So the main reason to be in an asset-backed security is capital preservation. It's one of the biggest things. That 20 bob will never be 18 or 5 or 0. The 20 or 21 or whatever, it doesn't come this way. Yeah.
Amazing. So, now, I hope that session was beautiful. Nasikia mmeuliza maswali, watu wamechemka bongo. Thank you so much. First of all, let's give him a round of applause for the amazing work done. So, thank you so much. My name is Nyambura Masharia, and thank you for being such a beautiful, beautiful group of people.